Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. If you're not comfortable sitting on a cushion on the ground, you can bring one of the chairs closer if you like. And we will begin by reciting, we will begin by reciting the Vadra Lineage prayer. So this is on page 6 of the prayer book that you will find on your cushions. So we will sing in Tibetan, and as best you can read the translation. Of course, it's always easier to do that when you've sung it a couple times already. On dorje chanjen de lo narodam marba mila cheje kambo tu som sheja kunjen garma ba cheje chanje juba zinam tam drita tsa sun palen roba so sablam chaidya chilang anyepem yame drogen tabokajula solva depso gajulamanam jubadzenonam tavrejinjilo shenlo gomji kangbar sombashin senor kuna chajen me batam tsende de ta chebe gom shenam ye kor shen ba me bar jenjilo mugur gomji gor son bashin menga tergo chebela mala jendo solva debe gom chena jemen mogu jewar jenjilo yeng me gom jinguzhir son bashin kanshar dobe ngo so mate Baju de gar jobe gom chenam gom jalo tan rawar Nam dong o chu gur so ba jin ji ya ma yin ji liang char wa la bang ga ro ba char ve gon chen la kor de yen me to ba din ji lo ke wa gun do yang da la ma tam dal me che gi pa la lo je chim sa ta lam je yun de ra zo ne dor je chang ge gom pan yor top sho dor je chang ge gom pan yor top sho. In the Dharma Expanse Palace of Akanishta is the essence of all Buddhas of the three times, who shows me directly my mind is Dharmakaya. I prostrate to the glorious exalted Gurus. Please bless me and all beings that our minds become the Dharma. Please bless us that the Dharma become the path. Please bless us that the path dispel confusion. Please bless us that confusion arise as wisdom. And so now, as usual, when we begin, the first thing to do is to check your motivation. As always, we should try to have as good a motivation as we can when talking about the Dharma. So, of course, we all come in with different motivations. When we're all different levels of practice, some new, some older, some perhaps very experienced. I don't know everyone's level of practice, but so whatever level of motivation you have, try to have at best the motivation of bodhicitta, the wish to bring all beings to Buddhahood, or at least the motivation to do good for yourself and others, at the very least. And sort of in the middle is the motivation of wanting to achieve liberation and so forth. Motivation is very important. So when we listen to the Dharma, it's important to always try to have a good, appropriate motivation as we listen. And we are continuing our series of the Introduction to Buddhism, which means that each week I've been talking about a slightly different topic. And we've generally gone through, since we started in May, we've gone through the basics of the foundation vehicle, the basic practices of Buddhism. We've discussed the Mahayana. We spent a little bit of time talking about the Vajrayana. So these are the three levels or three vehicles of Buddhism. And so what I'd like to talk about today is the practice that's kind of like often said to be the essence of Buddhism. Now when we talk about the essence of Dharma, the Dharma and Buddhism here are a little bit different. The essence of Buddhist practice is one thing. The essence of Dharma is another. Maybe they're actually the same. We can talk about that a little bit later. But the essence of Dharma is not harming, non-harm. In Sanskrit, it's ahimsa, which is the word that's very often translated as non-violent. When you're talking about like non-violent protests like Gandhi and Martin Luther King and the protests, the Nelson Mandela in South Africa, we talk about non-violent protests, and the word in Sanskrit is ahimsa, not harming, not causing harm. So the essence of Buddhism is not to harm. So if we're not going to harm, then, well, how do we do that? Well, the thing that we do is we make a vow, I'm not going to cause harm. And even more than that, I'm going to do something to do good. And so in this way, the essence of Buddhist practice is the practice of the 3 types of vows, or you could say the 3 levels of vows. I usually say the 3 types of vows, and I wonder if as I think about it today, if we're saying 3 levels of vows is maybe a little bit more important. So these are like what we use to kind of structure our practice, no matter what level of Buddhist practice we're on. And so these 3 types of vows are what we call the Pratimolcha Vows. Now, Pratimolcha is a Sanskrit word, and it means, like, to say it kind of freely, it'd be like personal liberation. These are the vows that you take and you hold in order to liberate yourself from samsara. If you take and keep these vows, then they provide the basis on which you can actually practice the Dharma. And through practicing the Dharma, then you can achieve liberation. So the motivation for taking the vows is to liberate yourself, and so we call them the vows of personal liberation, or often translated as vows of individual liberation. That's the first level of vow. And the second level of vow is the Bodhisattva Vow. So the Bodhisattva Vow is the commitment that you make that turns you into Bodhisattva. Before you've taken the vow, you're not really a Bodhisattva. When you've taken the vow, then you become a Bodhisattva. And this is the vow that, just like all of the Buddhas of the past and the present and future, I'm going to commit to bringing all sentient beings to Buddhahood, and in order to do that, I'm going to do all the Bodhisattva practices. That's the second level of the vow. That's the Bodhisattva vow. Then the third level of vows, what we call the Tantric Vows. So the Tantric Vows are the ones that are kind of hard to understand, because we don't think that we have a separate ceremony. Like last week we had a refuge vow ceremony, sometimes there are Bodhisattva vow ceremonies. And so then you wonder, well, what about those Tantric vow ceremonies? Well, actually, last week we had a vow for achieving a ceremony for the Tantric Vows when Dungse Lama Pema gave the Chenrezig empowerment. So these are the vows or commitments that you take when you receive an empowerment. The commitments or vows that just naturally happen because of the level of realization you have. So to speak about these, I'll speak about them individually a little bit, and then we'll talk about how to practice all 3 of them together and what the differences are. Because sometimes they're a little bit of a problem between, there's one that says, thou shalt not do this. Well, it doesn't write that. It's saying, I'm not going to do this. And then there are times when, in order to fill another, you have to do the other. So how do you balance out these different vows? So the first level of vow is the vow of personal liberation, the Pratimolcha Vow in Sanskrit, Pratimolcha. And these are the basic vows of vowing to refrain from causing harm. In particular, we have different levels of them. They're the vows that lay people take, and they're the vows that monastics take. So if we do it, what do we say? You could say that if we want to be, shall I be technical, we have 8 types of vows. There are the 1-day fasting vows. There are the 5 lay precepts for men and for women, so that's 3. Then you've got the 2 novice monks vows, and you've got the 2 novice monk and novice nun. Then you've got the nun in training, and then you've got the fully ordained monk and fully ordained nun, the bhikshu and bhikshuni, so that makes 8 vows. But to group it loosely, you've got lay vows and monastic vows. So for example, I have monastic vows because I'm a monk. In order to become a monk, you have to take vows, right? So these are vows that I take that are like, I'm not going to kill, I'm not going to engage in sexual activity, and so forth for these vows. But they're different vows than you take as a layperson. So as a layperson, and generally the vows that lay people take are either the fasting vows, which are to take 8 precepts for the space of 24 hours. You take them before dawn one day and you say, I'm taking these vows until the dawn of the next morning. That's a 1-day-long fasting vow. And then there are also the lay precepts, and I'm going to speak more about the lay precepts, the 5 lay precepts. I think these are pretty well, a lot of people speak about them, and maybe you have heard of them before. But the 5 lay precepts are, first, to give up killing, to give up taking that which is not given, to give up sexual misconduct, to give up telling lies, and in particular lies about having superior qualities. And then the fifth is to give up using alcohol or other intoxicants. So these are the 5 lay precepts that you take. Now, the basis of these precepts, I just want to take a look at my notes before I go off too far in the wrong direction. So when you're taking the vows, then the meaning of these vows is that you are restraining yourself from doing these actions. You're saying, I am not going to kill. When you're saying, I'm not going to kill, it means that you're not going to kill any being, but especially humans. And this means, and I think I spoke about this a few weeks ago, when you talk about not killing, it means doing it intentionally. So if you accidentally, you don't intend to do it, and you do, for example, if you should get, the most likely for us is if you get in a car accident and accidentally cause the death of another person, you have the lay precepts. Unless you intended to kill that person in that car accident, you have not actually broken your vows. Or if you are driving down the road and a deer jumps in front of your car and you kill the deer, you have not broken your vow. Now, if you're driving down the road and you see Granny walking across the street and you think, yeah, it's my chance, and you run her over, then you have broken your vow, right? So that's that. It's like saying, I'm not going to do it. And it means you're not going to do it intentionally, right? Similarly with not taking that which is not given. To put it simply, it's not stealing, but also not taking things that you don't really think, like the kind of white-collar pilfering that sometimes we do, like a little bit of this, a little bit of that. It's not quite stealing, but it's not really, quote, kosher. So it's also giving up that. And then, and then sexual misconduct. This is basically engaging in sexual activity with someone who's not your partner. And the reason why this is a vow is because it creates lots of problems, as you all know, and I don't need to tell you any more about that. Okay. And then the last one is telling lies, in particular, lies about having superhuman qualities, the great human qualities, like being able to see the future, past, or do incredible things, or to have realization, to say, even though I'm a layperson, I am a Buddha, when you know in your heart that you're not. And this is not thinking about your Buddha nature as being Buddha, but trying to make yourself look good, or saying, I am this, I am that, I have this degree of realization. That's telling a lie about a quality that you know you don't have. Now, if you're just confused, and you think you have that quality, but later it turns out you don't, well, you haven't really broken the vow, because you were just mistaken. So they're all kind of flexibility about that, but those are the 4 main vows. Those are the 4 root precepts. And then the 5th one is not drinking alcohol or other intoxicants. And the reason for this is because it makes you careless. I think I have told the story about the monk who went to visit someone who said, either kill my goat, sleep with me, or drink the alcohol. This was before the Buddha made the rule against alcohol. And so he drank the alcohol, and he got drunk, and he ended up sleeping with a woman, killing the goat, and then when her husband came home, killing him too. So this is why we don't do it. So, because it makes you careless, and as you know. Now, so these are the 5 lay precepts. When you take the 5 lay precepts as a layperson, it's not necessary to take all 5. You take the ones that you can hold. Now, different masters, when they give the vows, say different things. Some say that you can take any of them, but you have to include alcohol. Some say you can take any of the 5. So it depends a little bit upon the master that you're taking them from. But in general, you take the vows from a master, and then you can take, if you feel like I can only take this one, I can only give up killing, I'm not going to murder anyone in this lifetime, I know I'm not going to murder, so I might as well take the vow, right? So you take the vow. So the essence of the vow is actually not the not killing. The essence of the vow, well, here I'm explaining it from a Mahayana perspective, so you have to forgive me a little bit. The essence of the vow is the thought, I'm not going to do this, I'm giving it up. So there's a difference between not doing something and giving it up. For example, as we are all sitting here talking about the Dharma, we are not engaging in the activity of killing, as far as I can see. Now, unless some of you have some sort of a secret weapon that I can't see. But I don't think you do. I'm going to trust that you don't. And that reason, we're all sitting here, we're not killing. But that's different from having a vow, I'm not going to kill. Because when you have the vow, I'm not going to kill, then once you have made that vow, and as long as you're keeping that vow, you are actually holding that in every single instant, even if you're distracted, even if you're asleep. So like, maybe some of you are like hitmen. Any of you a hitman? I don't know. You're not going to answer me if you are, actually. So if you're a hitman, and you're going to go off on a contract on Tuesday and come back on Thursday having killed someone. Right now on this Saturday, you aren't killing anyone, right? So you're not accumulating today, right at this moment, you're not accumulating the bad karma of killing. But you haven't given up killing because next Wednesday you're going to perform the job, right? So you haven't given it up. So at this particular moment, you aren't accumulating bad karma, but you aren't getting any virtue. Now, assuming that you have the precept of, I'm not going to kill, you've taken that vow, you've gone to Dungse Lama Pema or some other Lama or whoever and taken the vow, I'm not going to kill, then right now, as you're sitting here, not only are you not killing, you're also gathering the virtue of gathering the virtue of keeping your vow. So every moment that you keep your vow, you're keeping the vow. And so it's like a great source of wealth and virtue that keeps coming as long as you keep your vow. So these are the 5 lay precepts. And when we take the 5 lay precepts, they're kind of simple in a sense. It's like we know that right now as a human, we can kind of control our actions. It's not always the easiest, but we can do it. You can give up these things, killing and stealing and sexual misconduct, lying and alcohol. You can give them up for the course of a life, and it's fairly easy. But we have no idea where we're going to be reborn in the future. And since we don't have any idea where we're going to be reborn in the future, then for the vows of personal liberation, you take them for the period of one life. This means that that once you take the vows from someone, then you hold them for the rest of your life, and then they're canceled, you could say, or you were released from the vows at the moment of your death. So they've got a definite time period. Now, when you're taking them, if you happen to break the vows, like if you do a minor breaking, is like if you find yourself killing an insect or an animal or something like, that's not going to completely break the vows, not like murdering a human, but it does break the vow. Well, you can confess and you can restore. And if you do something that really totally breaks your vows with the 5 lay precepts, you can actually then say, and go back and regret it, confess, and then take them again. Right? So you can, so that's possible with a lay precept. So that's how the lay precepts are. But once they're broken, they're generally broken. Of course, with the lay precepts, you can take them again. It's a little different with the monastic vows. It kind of differs with the level of vows. But we don't need to go into the monastic vows today. So that's the basic point about the basic thing about the personal liberation. The main point about these vows of personal liberation is the motivation that you are taking them with. They're called the vows of personal liberation because you're taking them in order to give yourself a solid basis for achieving liberation. In other words, the motivation is because you want to achieve liberation from samsara. I mean, if you think about it, if you want to do it to be happy and enjoy yourself in this lifetime, you're not going to take the one about no drinking, no. You want to go enjoy yourself, right? It's only if you have some sort of a higher purpose or some greater benefit that you see, and that benefit is the motivation of liberation. So that's the motivation. Now, So those are the lay precepts, but there's also the fasting precepts, the 1-day-long vows. Now, in our Tibetan tradition, we don't often actually take the fasting vows. Instead, we take what we call the Mahayana Sojourn vows, which are very, very similar. They're also 24-hour vows, and they're also the same precepts. The 5 I just mentioned, plus 3 branches of kind of like austerity, of giving up singing and dancing, high seats and jewelry, and eating after noon. So giving up singing, dancing, and jewelry is all included in 1. Giving up high seats is the 2nd, and then not eating after noon until the next sunup. So that next morning. So these are the vows, plus the 5 precepts. And they're really strict. So you only take them for a short period of time, and because it's only for a short period of time, you are really, really careful about them. Because it's a short period of time. So anyone can avoid killing for 24 hours. You can think, okay, I can wait. When sun comes up tomorrow, though. Actually, if you're thinking when sun comes up tomorrow, though, you haven't given up killing. So you're not really keeping the vow. So it's 24 hours, but 24 hours where you're especially careful. So when you do it as the fasting vows, then you take them at dawn, and then they go until the next dawn. The difference between the fasting vows and the Mahayana Sojourn vows, there are 2 differences that we take between the fasting vows and the Mahayana Sojourn vows that we usually take. So the Mahayana Sojourn vows, they come from, actually they're from Tantra. And they're from the lowest level of Tantra, which is called Kriya Tantra, the same Tantra as the Akshobhya practice that we do. Like, you remember when we have the Akshobhya, don't eat garlic and onions? Well, when you take the Mahayana Sojourn vows, because it's from the Kriya Tantra, you should also not eat garlic and onions, or any other members of the Alam family. That's the main difference in terms of the precepts. And then the second difference is the motivation. Because when you take the 1-day-long fasting vows, your motivation is, I want to achieve liberation, but I can't keep the 5 precepts for my whole life, or I'm not certain I can keep it. I'm not ready to commit to that. But I want to do it for 24 hours. So you're still doing it with the motivation of wanting to achieve liberation. With the Mahayana Sojourn vows, actually, the motivation is a little bit different. The motivation is, I want to restore, I've taken the Bodhisattva vows, I want to, and I feel like I've maybe, kind of bent the precepts a little bit, I want to restore them, so I'm going to take these Mahayana Sojourn vows. So you take them as a way to restore your precepts of your Mahayana of your Bodhisattva vow. So that's a little bit of the difference between the 2. But in terms of the precepts, they're almost exactly the same. Okay, so in general, those are the vows of individual liberation. And the reason we take them is that when you refrain from doing harmful actions, you're refraining from doing things that disturb your mind. And when you're no longer disturbing your mind, then you can do meditation. It gives you a good basis for achieving the results. So it's highly encouraged for anyone who's practicing Buddhism to engage in at least some level of the vows, even if you can only take 1. If if you're not a hitman, and if you're not a soldier, and you don't want to kill, then you can at least take the one about not killing and have that virtue from doing that. It's like a basis for all the other vows. So then the second level of vows is the Bodhisattva vow. There are a bunch of differences between the Bodhisattva vows. The first of them is what the vow is for. The Bodhisattva vow is a vow to achieve Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. This is the essence of the vow. So it's not just giving up harmful actions. It's saying, I'm going to do whatever I can to become a Buddha. I'm going to engage in the practices of a bodhisattva, practice generosity, discipline, and so forth, in order to achieve Buddhahood. So the goal of the vow is much higher. The motivation is bodhicitta, the motivation of wanting to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. And you want to do it no matter what. No matter how difficult it is, no matter what the cost might seem to be in this lifetime, you devote yourself entirely to this with no thought of yourself, ideally. Of course, it takes a while to get to that point. So that's the thought. So the motivation is bodhicitta. Now, in terms of the types of the vow, basically there are two. I mean, there are a couple of different traditions of taking it, but we won't go there. Basically, with the Bodhisattva vows, there are two. There's the vow of aspirational bodhicitta and the vow of engaged bodhicitta. So the vow of aspirational bodhicitta is saying, basically it's saying, I want to achieve Buddhahood. Making a particular vow, I want to achieve Buddhahood. And then the vow of engaged bodhicitta is, wanting to achieve Buddhahood is great. I'm actually going to do it. I'm going to do the practices, and so forth, generosity and all that. So these are taken off. Sometimes we take them together. Often we do take the vow according to the text from The Way of the Bodhisattva by Shantideva, where it says, just as the Sugatas, that is the Buddhas of the past, aroused the mind of bodhicitta, just as they followed step by step the training of the bodhisattvas, so too shall I, to benefit wanderers, arouse the mind of bodhicitta. So too shall I follow step by step the bodhisattva's training. So here is saying, just like the Buddhas and the bodhisattvas in the past, I'm also going to achieve Buddhahood in order to benefit other sentient beings. So that's the vow of aspirational bodhicitta. And then the second, the vow of engaged bodhicitta, is saying, so too shall I follow step by step the bodhisattva's training. So I also will go through the training of a bodhisattva, step by step, until I achieve the level of Buddhahood. So that's the vow of engaged bodhicitta. Sometimes you can take them in separate ceremonies. There's some traditions where you have one ceremony for the aspirational bodhicitta and one for the engaged bodhicitta. Sometimes you take them both together. But the way this vow works is it's a little bit different than the personal liberation, because the vow of personal liberation, like when you take the 5 precepts, you go to Dungse Lama Pema or whoever is going to give you the vows, you take the 5 precepts, and then you have the vows for the rest of your life. You don't need to take them again. You've taken them. Now, you might sometime feel like reciting the words again to remind yourself of it, but you've already taken the vows. You already have the vows. Okay? The Bodhisattva vow is a little bit different. You take the Bodhisattva vow. Usually people take it for the first time from some master, a monk or nun, whoever is going to give it to you, or a lay person who's going to give it to you, someone who has the vow and who's able to practice it and knows how to give it. And then when you go back, you take the vow on your own, like once a day or even 6 times a day, 3 times during the day, 3 times at night, they say. You recite it over and over again. You think about it over and over again. And you do this over and over again, and there are a couple of reasons for it. The first is that it's different than the vows of individual liberation in that the point of the vow is not so much to keep the vow, because the Bodhisattva vow is really difficult. I mean, it's pretty easy to say, I'm not going to kill, and then sometimes you do have to kind of hold yourself back. But it's pretty easy not to kill. But when you say, I am going to keep this vow, I'm never going to give up on anyone, I'm going to practice bodhicitta, I'm going to consider all sentient beings more important than myself. Well, this is harder to do because we don't have control over our minds. And so for that reason, when you take the Bodhisattva vow, you take the Bodhisattva vow to train your mind. The analogy is like this. The vows of personal liberation are like a porcelain teacup. The Bodhisattva vow is like a gold jug, a gold vase. Now, when you drop the gold vase on the ground, when you drop the porcelain teacup on the ground, what's going to happen? It's shattered. It's done. It's broken. You can't really do anything about it. You can take, especially with the lay precepts, you can take them again, but that's a new vow. You've broken the one vow and you have to take it over again. The Bodhisattva vow is not like that. The Bodhisattva vow, because you're doing it to train your mind, You drop a gold jug, a gold vase on the ground, and what happens? It gets dented. So you take it to the goldsmith and you hammer it out, and it's just like new. Your gold, right? You can fix it. It's not like a porcelain teacup that can't be fixed. And so and that's the way it is with the Bodhisattva vow. It's much easier to break because you don't have control over your mind, but it's easier to fix. And so this is why we take the Bodhisattva vow over and over again. So when you've taken the Bodhisattva vow, you might wonder, well, what is it that you're actually committing to do? I mean, what is it that you can't do? Because it's pretty clear with the vow of personal liberation that you can't kill, steal, engage in sexual misconduct and all that. That's pretty clear. What about the Bodhisattva vow? Well, there are different lists about what you can or can't do with the Bodhisattva vow. But the very basic thing that you have to keep in mind once you've taken the Bodhisattva vow is the idea that you're never going to give up on any sentient being. No matter what, no matter how horrible someone may be, you're not going to give up on them. If you ever have the thought, this person is just too far gone, there's nothing that can do, and they've done so much to hurt me and everyone, I'm never going to do anything to help for them, then you have broken your Bodhisattva vow. Now, there may be times when you may feel like there's someone you can't help, you can't do anything for, and you need to get some space where you can't help them. There's nothing you can do. That's just someone who's just really hard and really difficult. There's no way you can reach them in this lifetime. But you say, I can't help this being now. And even though I can't help them now, in the future, when I have the opportunity, I'm going to do everything I can to help this sentient being. I just can't do it now. There's no way to help them now. For example, you might think to yourself, let's take, the current events. We have Vladimir Putin. He's, conducting a war. He's threatening horrible things for the entire world, all because he's just unable to back down and admit that he made a mistake, right? And so, if you go over there and try to help him, and if you're even lucky enough to see him, there's no way you could help him. Now, if you think he's such a horrible person, he's threatening to destroy the entire world, I don't want to have anything to do with him, he's through, then you've broken your Bodhisattva vow. But if you think to yourself, I can't reach him now, but in the future, I make the aspiration that in the future I might be able to help him. Like, he's conducted a lot of wars, he's caused the deaths of, hundreds of thousands of people between Chechnya and Georgia and Ukraine and Syria. He's killed thousands and thousands, and he's karmically responsible for all those people, even though he didn't do it himself. So he's going to go, he's got the karma to be reborn in hells, many, many times over. And if you think about that, and you think, this poor being, because when he's born in the hells, he'll remember for the first instant that he's there, why he's there, and then he'll be so crazed by suffering, and so he just won't remember anything. And so at that point, he's just going to be a regular suffering sentient being. And what can we do to help him? So if you say, I can't help him now, but I'm making the vow that when I get the chance, I will do anything to help him, then you haven't broken your Bodhisattva vow. You haven't given up on him. So you see the difference? Giving up is saying, never going to do anything. But the way of the Bodhisattva would be to say, even though I can't help him now, I will do what I can to help him whenever I get a chance. So that's the difference. Now, another big difference between the Bodhisattva vow and the Pratimolcha vows is how long you have taken it for. Because when you take the vow of the Bodhisattva, you are taking it from now until the essence of enlightenment, which means from now until the moment you reach Buddhahood. It's a long time. It's a big commitment. So it takes a little bit of courage to take it. Of course, if you think about it in terms of, a series of lives, we're going to be undergoing difficulties and samsara anyways until that time. So we might as well make it meaningful by taking the Bodhisattva vow. So you take the Bodhisattva vow and you go through and you follow the practice of the Bodhisattva, and you have that Bodhisattva vow until you achieve Buddhahood. So this means that when you pass away and you were reborn in your next lifetime, you already have the Bodhisattva vow. You might have to remind yourself about it. Of course, that's how it happens. For the new lifetime, you may want to take it over again. You probably will want to take it over again in your next lifetime. But because you've done it in one lifetime, then it'll be more likely that you'll be able to do it in the next lifetime, so forth. So that's the Bodhisattva vow. Anyway, so that's what we talk about, the Bodhisattva vow. So that's the second level of vows. And then there's the third level of vows is the Tantric vows. And so the Tantric vows are the commitments that you make when you receive an empowerment. Now I know that maybe some of you are thinking, last week we had that empowerment ceremony with Lama Pema. What did I get myself into? You mean I took a vow by taking the empowerment? Or you went to some sort of other empowerment when Mingyur Rinpoche came in the spring and he gave a bunch of empowerments in the Vancouver area, and you went to all three and you think, oh, now I've got vows? What vows do I have? I didn't know. Relax. Because actually with the Tantric vows, you really get them when you gain the realization of the empowerment. When you have the empowerment, you have an experience, you see the nature somehow through that, then at that point, there naturally comes a commitment that you're making. And you also have the ability to take it. Most of us, when we take an empowerment, we're not really getting the whole empowerment. We're kind of getting like the blessings of the empowerment, which is good. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. We want to take the whole empowerment. We want to receive all the full empowerment, but it takes a while to be ready. So you take it and take the empowerments and you get the blessings. But when you are actually taking an empowerment, you actually receive the empowerment, then you've got a commitment. Now there are many different ways that you can talk about it. We talk about root downfalls and this other thing. But basically the point of a Tantric vow is that once you have taken a Tantric empowerment, you receive the Tantric empowerment, then the point is that you need to see all sentient beings as being Buddhas. You have to have pure view of all sentient beings. We've talked about this a little bit in the previous weeks. You know, you have the point of doing like the deity practice or so forth is that you have Buddha nature. You have the nature of a Buddha inside of you, and so you're just trying to reveal that by visualizing it and doing the practices of the Buddha nature. Well, it's to see that it's not just you, it's all sentient beings, all of us who are in this room, so forth. So seeing all sentient beings as Buddha, having what we call, sometimes it's called pure outlook or pure view or called sacred outlook. It's looking and seeing that all sentient beings, even Vladimir Putin, are Buddhas, and seeing them like that. And having that pure view of seeing everyone in that way. So this is a very, very difficult vow for us normally to keep. Now, like the Bodhisattva vow, there's no expiry date on the Tantric vows. You have them until you achieve enlightenment. They also go for the entire practice. So when you take an empowerment, you gain some degree of realization through the empowerment, then because you have that degree of realization, you can keep these vows. You're able to see that all sentient beings are indeed Buddhas. In the meantime, for example, all of us who took the Chenrezig empowerment with Lama Pema last week, we can think, okay, all beings are Chenrezig. We're all the same. We all have that same quality, that same essence of Buddha nature, that nature of compassion. And just continually meditating on it, reminding that. So instead of seeing people as being either people you like or people you dislike, you see them all as being the deities. Chenrezig, Medicine Buddha, whatever deity is that are Green Tara, whatever deity it is they're practicing. We do Akshobhya practice, seeing everyone as being Akshobhya, or as being all the deities in the mandala, the 8 offering goddesses and so forth. And so you see all beings as being deities, and that's how you keep the Tantric vows. This is kind of a very subtle thing, and it's even more difficult to do than the Bodhisattva vows. The Bodhisattva vows, all you really have to do is just have to keep that motivation. But to continually see people as being pure, that's really hard. So these are very difficult. And so for that reason, when you take the Bodhisattva vows, it's really important when you take the Tantric vows, that's why it becomes important to do the Vajrasattva practice and to recite Vajrasattva mantras and do other things to purify your vows. And even a lot of people recommend that you recite some Vajrasattva mantras every evening, because the Vajrasattva mantra is a purification mantra, so it helps you purify all of the impurities that you have. So the vows are successively harder to take, harder to keep. And so it's like keeping the Tantric vows is said to be like the highest level of vows, and keeping the vows of personal liberation is like the kind of lowest level of vows. But they're all really important. In fact, you cannot take the Bodhisattva vow unless you have a vow of individual liberation. Because how can you vow to help all sentient beings if you have not first committed to not harming them? Right? It's like with a doctor, what is the first part of the Hippocratic Oath? Do no harm. Before you can help, you have to say at least do no harm. And so then once you have that basis saying, I'm committing to doing no harm, then you can say, okay, I'm going to commit to bring everyone to the state of Buddhahood. And then on top of that, you add the Tantric vows, which is viewing everyone as a Buddha. Well, you have to have Bodhichitta to do that. You have to have the kind of the realization of that. We all have bodhicitta and the capacity to achieve Buddhahood. We all have Buddha nature. And then when you have that, you can take the Tantric vows. So they all are based on the vows of personal liberation. So it's really important to keep all the level of vows. And in fact, that's the Tibetan practice. On the outside, we call it the external vows of personal liberation, because those are talking about the external. People can see, especially if you're going to end up walking around wearing monastic robes like me, people can see that you're keeping them. They can see that you are not killing and stealing and lying and so forth. With the Bodhisattva vows, others can't see it. So we call it the inner vows of the Bodhisattva. It's in your mind. So no one else can see it. So it's the inner vow. And then there's the secret vow, which is really hard for anyone else to get. So it's the secret vow of the Tantra vow. So these are the three levels of vows. And we try to practice them all together. But of course, in your practice, you get to them at a level that's appropriate for you. You start out with the vow that you're willing to take. You may not feel like you're ready to take. Actually, first of all, you have to take the refuge vow before you can take any of the other ones. The refuge vow, by the way, is considered like a type of the vows of personal liberation. In terms, if you're going to classify it among the three level of vows, it's one of the types of the lay precepts, lay vows. And so then in addition, commitment of either maybe not killing or not stealing, or whichever of the precepts you're going to take, any of the five, and you do that. Or you might feel like, well, I've taken refuge, but I'm not sure if I can keep the precepts for my whole life. I want to take the 8 precepts of fasting vows for a day, just to do it. Do it on a good day, right? So you do what you can. You might find yourself saying, well, I can take the 5 precepts, I can take one of the 5 precepts, and then a couple of years into it, you realize, well, I can actually keep all 5, and then you go and you can take the rest of them. That's fine too. You can then take the 5 plus, celibacy. Or you can then later go and you do it in whatever level you're able to do. And once you have the vows of one of the levels of vows of individual liberation, then you can also take the Bodhisattva vow. No one's going to say, okay, you took refuge vow last week, when are we going to schedule your Bodhisattva vows? No one's going to say that. You take it when you are ready. When you develop the motivation, you feel like, yeah, this is what I want to do. Because if you take it because of some sort of external thing saying, you better take those vows, you're not going to keep it. You're not going to be able to keep it because you don't have the motivation. So when you develop the motivation, think, I want to do this, then you take the vows. And then you can take a tantric, take an empowerment. Then if you've received, if you've gained the realization of the empowerment, you also get the tantric vows. But you do that at your own choice. So that's how we do it. So in a sense, our practice is kind of structured by when we take the vows and the level of practice that we are doing, the level of our motivation. But sometimes when you're keeping them, it's a little bit hard. For example, say you have taken the vow of not eating after solar noon. And in the evening, we have Guru Rinpoche practice. And in the Guru Rinpoche practice, there is the Gana Chakra, which is kind of like a ritual. Often it's translated as a feast. It's more than just a feast. So you have this ritual thing, and you've given some food that you're supposed to eat. Well, I've taken a vow not to eat after noon. And here they're giving me food, and I have to eat it as part of the practice. What do I do? Well, in that instance, the higher vow prevails. You follow the higher vow. The Tantric vow is higher. So you eat a little bit while you're in the puja, while you're still doing that feast part of the puja. Once the feast part of the puja is done, they've come by and collected all the leftovers like they do, then at that point you're done. No more till the morning. But during the puja, you follow the higher vow. That's like one way of happening. Another example of this is a story of one of Manjushri's previous lives. He was a bodhisattva named youthful Jyoti. Or you could, maybe it was Kumara Jyoti in Sanskrit. Anyways, Jyoti was his name. And he took a vow of celibacy for the rest of his life. But there was this woman who fell in love with him, completely head over and heels in love with him, and she threatened to kill herself if he did not marry her. And she was going to do it. So, being a bodhisattva, even though he had a vow of celibacy, he married her. And he spent 12 years with her. And over the 12 years, he taught her a bit of Dharma. And then at 12 years, she was ready to practice the Dharma. And he went back to keeping his bodhisattva, to keeping his vow of celibacy. Because he did this not out of he didn't have any desire on his own. I kind of wonder how the marriage worked out, but he didn't have any desire on his own. He did it for her sake, as a way to bring her to enlightenment. His motivation was pure. So even though on the outside it looks like he violated his vow of celibacy, internally he didn't. He kept his bodhisattva vow, and that bodhisattva vow did it. But it's a really difficult thing to do, actually, because it's very easy to say, oh yes, I have to keep my bodhisattva vow, so I'm going to be able to do X even though I have a vow against it. It's really easy to trick yourself. When the Gyalwang Karmapa was in Vancouver in 2017, at one of the talks he was asked about it, and he put a pretty high threshold. If you can really do it completely out of compassion, with no thought of any self-interest, then go ahead and do it. You're doing it in terms of keeping the bodhisattva vow. But if not, you're kidding yourself. So you don't want to kid yourself. And now I've got the bodhisattva vow. You know, the Tibetans they'd like to tell the story about about Captain Great Courage. He was traveling with 500 arhats on an ocean voyage. And there was one person on the ship who wanted to kill them all. Black Spearman was his name. Black Spearman went down to the bottom, the hold of the ship, and was boring a hole in the hull in order to sink it. And the Bodhisattva Great Courage realized that the only way to stop him would be to kill him. If Black Spearman were allowed to do it, since there were 500 arhats on the ship, he would be born in the lowest of hells for 500 lifetimes, experience incredible suffering for eon after eon. The only thing that could prevent him that rebirth would be to kill him. So he killed him. Actually, if the ship is filled with arhats, none of them care if they're going to die or not. They're beyond caring about living or dying. Bodhisattvas are beyond caring about living or dying. But because that person who was trying to kill them would have experienced the suffering of hell anyways, he killed him. So a lot of people would say, well then, it'd be okay for us to go and, we can fight in Ukraine out of compassion. No. Not going to work unless you have really reached that level of completely selfless, doing it entirely out of compassion, which means it's very, very difficult for us. So that's the basic way. We've got these 3 levels of vows. You've got the vows of personal liberation, which means not doing harm, avoiding, giving up harm. Then you've got the vows of the Bodhisattva, which means also committing to bringing all to Buddhahood. And then in addition we have the vows of the Tantra, which means viewing all sentient beings as Buddhas. When you see them as Buddhas, then you see everything they do as being an activity as the Buddha. So we see Vladimir Putin as being a Buddha and see all the destruction that he's causing as the activity of a Buddha. This is not easy. So that's like the levels of the 3 different levels of vows. And so the basis of Tibetan practice is kind of trying to do all of them together on the external, internal, and secret level. So I think that's maybe enough about this topic for right now, but you all might have some questions. Yes? Excuse me, I'm having trouble hearing you. Yeah, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. So the question is, for the people who are listening on YouTube or whatever, the question is, if with someone like Vladimir Putin, we're not able to do something to help them and we can't stop them or prevent them from doing what they're doing, there's no way to reach them now. Well, what about saying prayers? That's exactly what we're talking about. As a bodhisattva, the prayer is, I want to bring each and every sentient being in all times and all directions to Buddhahood. And that, of course, includes Vladimir Putin. So you make the prayer, I can't reach him now, but I pray to be able to reach him now. You think about him in particular when you're reciting any other prayer that you recite. If you recite the Sukhavati prayers like we often do at the end of practices, you think of him while you're doing the Sukhavati prayers. Or any other prayer. If you're making your own prayers, then you can include him as one of the people that you are praying for. And that's how you deal with it. So in the practice of the Bodhisattva, aspirations are considered really, really important. Because when you make the aspiration to do something, you're planting the seed so that in the future it will ripen. And so by making that aspiration, you're doing exactly that. You're planting the seed so that in the future you will have a connection to be able to actually benefit him. Excuse me? Oh, high seats, great and high seats. Yes, this is one of the precepts of the eight precepts of the fast. So a high seat, I mean, there are definitions of high seats about it not being high or great seats. Forget about the definitions about exactly the measurement. The point is not to sit on any seat or bed that puts you into an important position. Because in ancient times, they didn't have chairs like we do today. And so, they would set up thrones for important people. So when you're sitting on a throne, you're putting yourself in a big place. Now, you might be if you walk into a kitchen where there are bar stools around the kitchen, you're going to be sitting on a seat that is taller than the definition given in the Vinaya of a great or high seat, because you are probably twice that height. But it's not actually violating the rule in spirit, because this is just an ordinary seat in our culture. So it means sitting on, like if you were to put yourself in like the most important seat, a big seat above, that's where everyone's going to look at you. Yes. So this is basically the question is it about not making yourself seem better or more important than other people? The answer is yes. That's the point. It's to be modest and it's a way to overcome pride. Yeah, okay. So if you are offered a position of responsibility and you have that precept, then is it against the precept to accept that, or is it a question of if you want to be like the top dog, the most important person? So now for lay people, it's a 24-hour vow. So unless you take vows every morning, it's not generally going to be an issue for a lay person. So, if you are, for example, maybe you are like the head of your company or group or whatever, and so you have to sit in a position of authority. Well, you don't have that vow. You don't have to worry about it. For one thing. Even if you did, it's probably, if you are thinking about it as being me in that position. The reason why, at the time of the Buddha, there were kings who took the 5 lay precepts. And they still sat on thrones because they didn't have a vow against sitting on a great or high seat. So it was for monastics. That's a vow that's primarily for monastics, or that lay people hold for a period of 24 hours. Now for a monastic, for example, for myself, I'm not supposed to sit on a throne, but there are times when as a monastic I need to sit on a throne. For example, sometimes when I teach the Dharma, they put up a throne. So when that happens, the instruction is to think, actually, that it is not me sitting on the throne, it is my robes. That's where, well, there are other levels of instruction too, but that's how it goes. Does anyone else have any other questions this morning too? Susan? Yeah. Okay. Yes, yes. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Okay. So there are 2 questions. I mean, in general, we talk in Buddhism about the equality of all sentient beings. So are there different karmic consequences for example, killing a mosquito or killing a human? What are the differences there? And then the other thing is, for example, if Susan goes out and kills another human being, if she's the hitman, say, then so if she goes out and kills, and then she sincerely regrets. So if she's going to sincerely regret, she's not a hit person. So if you kill someone and then you sincerely regret, well, how does the confession work, basically, right? This is your question. What is the nature of the confession? How does it help? What does it do to the future karma? Yeah. Okay. So the first question, when we talk about the equality of sentient beings, the equality of sentient beings is that all sentient beings want to be happy. And all sentient beings do not want to suffer. They want to avoid suffering. This is the level in that all sentient beings are the same. And they all, to put it in the contemporary terms, they all have an equal right to be happy and an equal right not to suffer. Not that there's not actually much question of rights in Buddhism, but that's a different matter. Anyways, so this is the descent that all sentient beings, on that fundamental level, to be happy and wanting to avoid suffering, we're all exactly the same. And we all have the same right to happiness. But sentient beings are different in kind of their levels of where they are. And so it's entirely reasonable to say that a bodhisattva is a greater being than us. A great bodhisattva who's on the level is is a greater being than us. And you see, it's entirely reasonable to say that humans are superior to animals. And I'm running out of battery power on the microphone. I hope that it's not going in and out too badly. But so that's the level that the level of, so there's a superior and so forth on kind of the relative level of where you are. Now, when we're talking about the karmic consequences of killing, though, the karmic consequences of killing depend upon your intention in doing it, and the amount of harm you're actually doing. So when you kill a mosquito, it's not like you're premeditating it. I mean, it's just like, I get rid of that, and it's done. And because that animal is a mosquito and mosquitoes, of course they have Buddha nature. They can achieve enlightenment, but the likelihood of achieving Buddhahood as a mosquito is very, very slim, unless you meet a really, really great being who can help you. I wish I was one of those beings who could help all those mosquitoes, but I'm not, and there are very few of them, right? They have less capacity, so killing them is less of a harm. So the karmic consequences of killing a mosquito, now if you are totally infuriated and you kill a mosquito in a huge state of absolute rage, then your motivation is incredibly strong, so it's a very bad action. If your motivation is like, I killed it. It was kind of intentional, so yeah, it's a bad action, but your motivation is very weak. So so that's more common with the mosquito, for example. Now with a human, you're generally going to have a stronger motivation, because we consider them more, what do we say? We consider humans more valuable, so our motivations are stronger. And the second thing is that because humans have a degree of intelligence and the ability, for example, I am unable to help mosquitoes. I'm not sure if I'm able to help humans. I try. Right? So humans have a higher capacity, so it's a greater harm to the human whom you kill than it is a harm to the mosquito. So that's a greater consequence. So your motivation is stronger, and the person and the being that you're killing is more able to, incurring a greater loss, so therefore the karmic consequences are much stronger. Now, so that's basically saying it really depends upon the karmic consequences. So in general, you could say, but not entirely. In general, the consequences of killing mosquitoes is less than the consequence of killing humans. Except that the other thing that makes karmic activity hard is when you do it repeatedly. And so if you are swatting mosquitoes 20 times a night for the entire summer, summer after summer, it's a lot of repeated killing. And so that makes it worse. So, but once you recognize that you've killed, now whether you're regretting killing a human or killing a mosquito, it's the same. You can make the confession. And the confession, you have to have sincere regret. The feeling like you want to just get rid of it, expiate it. You want to completely purify yourself of it. You have to make the confession you have to have the support. So often in the Tibetan practice, we imagine the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, because they're omniscient, make a confession to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. But you can also go to a person and make a confession. And then there's the method of doing it, which is actually the method is to do a virtuous action with the conception that you're doing it in order to confess. This is why you recite like a particular prayer or sutras or particular mantras in the confession. And then the fourth one, and really important, is that you have to have the resolve, I'm never going to do this again. No more killing mosquitoes, no more killing humans. If you think to yourself, I'm confessing all those mosquitoes I killed this summer, but next summer, just wait. Then you aren't going to purify any of them this summer. Did you raise your hand again? No. Okay. I think that perhaps we have had enough questions. It's maybe time for our... Oh, one more question. Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's normal. No, it's normal. Yeah, so what you make sure you do is that you motivate on bodhicitta, meditate on bodhicitta, so that when you go out to give like some food to a homeless person, that you're doing it with the thought, by giving food to this person, may I make the connections that I can bring them to the state of Buddhahood. And then you're doing it with the motivation of bodhicitta. Right? So that's the motivation that you need to try to do. Now, some days you're going to forget to do this because you're an ordinary person. But the more you try, the more you get in the habit of doing it. When you look at them, it's like Shantideva says, when you see people, you should think, it's because of this person that I'm going to achieve enlightenment. So you see that homeless person, you should think, I'm giving them something now. It's because of this that I can achieve enlightenment. And you feel incredible gratitude towards that person for being there to receive your gift. That's what you do. And then as you do that more and more, then the pride at other people saying, oh, Susan, she's so kind and generous, that's going to go away. Naturally, the more you meditate on bodhicitta, you don't need to worry about it too much. When it happens, notice it, don't follow it, but don't beat yourself up. Okay, so it's time for a weekly meditation. We'll do about 10 minutes of meditation now. So sit up straight. Relax. Your eyes open, looking either into space in front of you or slightly down, and perhaps at the carpet a meter or two in front of yourself. And then when you feel ready, on your next breath out, you start to count. Just count each out breath until you get to 10. And then start over. Okay. So let's conclude by reciting the dedication of merit, which is on page 217. The very last page. Osanam de tam jesi bani tomne nye beranam pam jete Kegana chivalong trobai sibe toledro kunyon rosho. So thank you very much. I think we will have tea downstairs in a few moments. You can join us for tea if you like. And I look forward to seeing you all next week, if not before.